Picture a quiet Salt Lake City neighborhood where one man's rage triggered over 200 police calls. Maurice Raffoul harassed his neighbors, assaulted his own father, and threatened to kill anyone who crossed him. Why did this male Karen get away with terrorizing everyone for so long? Welcome to Sugar House, a charming neighborhood in Salt Lake City, Utah, where tree-lined streets and cozy homes create a sense of community. Families walk their dogs, kids play in the parks, and neighbors know each other by name. But for years, one man shattered this peace, turning a quiet suburb into a place of fear and chaos. His name was Maurice Raffoul, a 44-year-old man living with his elderly parents, Assad and Donna, in a house that became the center of over 200 police calls. Maurice wasn't just a difficult neighbor. He was a one-man wrecking ball, harassing residents, assaulting his own family, and even forcing a SWAT team to descend on his street. You might have heard the term Karen, someone who demands their way, complains endlessly, and makes life miserable for those around them. But Maurice Raffoul took this behavior to a whole new level, earning him the label of a male Karen with a criminal edge. His actions weren't just petty outbursts, they were violent, relentless, and terrifying, driven by a mix of mental illness and unchecked rage. Diagnosed with a schizotype disorder, Maurice refused medication, and his parents, for reasons we'll explore, kept bailing him out, literally and figuratively. This documentary will take you through Maurice Raffoul's decades-long campaign of terror, from threatening neighbors with death to choking his own father and sparking a 3-hour SWAT standoff. We'll hear from victims like Cheryl Hannon, who still lives with the trauma of his threats, and we'll uncover why the system let him slip through the cracks for so long. What drove Maurice to this point? How did a single man hold an entire neighborhood hostage? And what finally brought his chaos to an end? Everything you're about to hear comes from verified sources: 2 news investigations by reporter Wendy Halloran, court documents, and statements from those who lived through this nightmare. This is a story of fear, failure, and the fight for justice. So stick with us for a true crime case you've likely never heard before. If you're ready to uncover the truth about Maurice Raffoul, hit that like button and let's get started. Let's step back to Sugar House, Salt Lake City, in the mid-1990s, where the Raffoul family home on a quiet street became a source of fear for everyone nearby. Maurice Raffoul, then in his early teens, lived with his parents, Assad and Donna, in a house that would soon become infamous. By 2024, police had been called to that address over 200 times. Yes, you heard that right. Over 200 calls since 1995. These weren't just noise complaints or petty disputes. The calls involved domestic violence, harassment, and disturbances tied to Maurice's untreated mental illness. For neighbors, living near the Raffouls felt like a constant battle to feel safe in their own homes. Maurice was diagnosed with a schizotype disorder, a serious mental health condition that can cause delusions and erratic behavior. Court records show he refused medication, and his parents, Assad and Donna, didn't push him to get help. Instead, they often downplayed his actions or bailed him out when trouble came. This pattern of enabling set the stage for years of chaos. By the early 2000s, Maurice, now in his 20s, was already making life miserable for those around him. Neighbors like Sean and Cheryl Hannon, who lived just a few houses away, bore the brunt of his rage. Sean, a local news employee at KUTV, and his wife Cheryl described Maurice's behavior as relentless. He'd stand outside their home, yelling profanity-laced insults and threats that left them shaken. One chilling moment came when Maurice told Cheryl to get a shovel and dig a hole for her husband, implying he'd kill Sean. These weren't empty words. Maurice's threats felt real, and they kept coming. Another neighbor, Jeff Dibb, put it perfectly in a 2 News interview. It was like living next to a ticking time bomb. Every day, residents wondered what Maurice might do next. Police reports from the 2000s paint a grim picture. Maurice's outbursts weren't just verbal. He'd bang on neighbors' doors, scream in the middle of the night, and confront anyone who dared to challenge him. One incident involved him chasing a neighbor's car down the street, yelling about imagined slights. These weren't the actions of a typical Karen demanding to speak to a manager. Maurice's behavior was aggressive, unpredictable, and deeply unsettling. His male Karen persona came from this entitled need to control and intimidate, but it was backed by a willingness to cross lines most wouldn't. What made this worse was the lack of consequences. Despite dozens of police visits, Maurice often faced only minor charges or short detentions. His parents, especially his father, Assad, stepped in repeatedly, paying bail or defending Maurice's actions as a product of his mental illness. Court records show Assad argued against forced medication, claiming it would harm Maurice more than help. This left neighbors frustrated and scared as Maurice returned to the same house, ready to start the cycle again. By the 2010s, the situation in Sugar House was reaching a breaking point. The Hannon family, Jeff Dibb, and others started documenting Maurice's behavior, hoping to build a case for stronger action. They filed complaints, sought restraining orders, and pleaded with police to do more. But Maurice's mental health issues complicated things. Officers responding to calls often found themselves dealing with a man who was clearly unwell, but not always breaking the law in ways that led to lasting consequences. One neighbor, Sean Bailey, told 2 News he felt like the system was failing them. "We were trapped," he said, living in fear of someone who seemed untouchable. The Raffoul home became a symbol of that fear. Every police car that pulled up, every late-night outburst, reminded Sugar House residents that Maurice was still there. And yet, this was only the beginning. Maurice's actions were about to take a darker turn, pushing the neighborhood and his own family into a nightmare they couldn't escape. What would it take to stop him? And why did it take so long? Stay with us because the next chapter of this story gets even more intense. If you're shocked by what you've heard so far, give this video a like and let us know in the comments. Have you ever dealt with a neighbor like Maurice? By the early 2010s, Maurice Raffoul had already turned Sugar House into a neighborhood on edge, with over 200 police calls tied to his harassment and erratic behavior. But in 2021, his actions took a darker turn, crossing from verbal threats to physical violence that shocked even those who'd grown used to his chaos. This part of our story focuses on 3 key moments: 2 brutal assaults on his own father and a dramatic SWAT standoff that showed just how dangerous the man neighbors called a male Karen had become. Let's start with September 2021, when Maurice's rage turned on the one person closest to him, his elderly father, Assad Raffoul. According to court records, on September 7, 2021, police were called to the Raffoul home after a disturbing report. Maurice, then 41, had attacked his father, a frail man in his 70s. In a fit of anger, he grabbed Assad by the throat, choking him while yelling that he wanted him dead. Neighbors heard the commotion, and police arrived to find Assad shaken but alive. Maurice was arrested and charged with abuse or neglect of a vulnerable adult, a 3rd-degree felony. Court documents reveal he didn't deny the attack. He openly expressed his desire to harm his father. For the first time, it seemed like Maurice might face real consequences. But as we'll see, the system wasn't done letting him slip through. Maurice's conviction for the 2021 assault should have been a wake-up call. He was placed on probation, ordered to stay away from his parents' home, and required to address his mental health issues. But Maurice had no intention of following those rules. Less than a year later, in June 2022, he was back at it, again targeting his father. On June 15, 2022, police reports state that Maurice confronted Assad at their Sugar House home, demanding $50,000. When Assad refused, Maurice's anger exploded. He threatened to kill his father, shoving him and creating another terrifying scene. Police arrested him for abuse of a vulnerable adult and interfering with an arresting officer as he resisted their attempts to take him into custody. Neighbors like Cheryl Hannon, who'd endured years of Maurice's threats, were horrified but not surprised. Cheryl told 2 News Investigations, "I have PTSD from his threats. Every time we thought he was gone, he came back, angrier than before." Her words capture the toll Maurice's behavior took on Sugar House. His ability to return to the same house, despite probation and restraining orders, left residents feeling helpless. The June 2022 assault wasn't just a family matter. It was another sign that Maurice's male Karen entitlement, his need to dominate and intimidate, was growing more dangerous. And yet he was released again, free to terrorize the neighborhood. How was this possible? Why did the system keep giving him chances? The answer lies partly in Maurice's mental health. His schizotype disorder caused delusions that fueled his paranoia, like believing neighbors were hacking his devices or working with some shadowy Louisiana mob. Court records show his father, Assad, fought against forced medication, arguing it would harm Maurice more than help. This left police and courts in a bind. Maurice was clearly a danger, but his mental illness made it hard to hold him accountable in ways that stuck. Neighbors, however, didn't see a sick man. They saw a threat who kept getting away with it. And in August 2022, that threat reached a breaking point. On August 3, 2022, the Raffoul home became the scene of a 3-hour SWAT standoff that gripped Sugar House. According to 2 News, Maurice assaulted a family member. Reports suggest it was his father again, then barricaded himself inside the house, refusing to come out. Police arrived, but Maurice's defiance escalated the situation. The Salt Lake City SWAT team was called in, surrounding the home with armored vehicles and negotiators. For 3 hours, the neighborhood held its breath, wondering if this would end in tragedy. Finally, Maurice surrendered peacefully, but the damage was done. Residents like Sean Hannon, who lived just down the street, told reporters they felt like prisoners in their own homes. The SWAT standoff made headlines, but incredibly, Maurice was released within 24 hours. He'd violated a jail release agreement almost immediately, returning to his parents' home despite court orders. Police arrested him again, but the cycle continued. For neighbors, this was the ultimate frustration. Cheryl Hannon told 2 News, "We kept asking, how does he keep getting out? How many more times do we have to live through this?" That question hung over Sugar House like a dark cloud. Maurice's violence wasn't slowing down. It was getting worse. And his next move would push the neighborhood and the law to their limits. We're halfway through this story, and the tension is only building. Maurice Raffoul's assaults and standoffs showed he was more than a nuisance. He was a danger. But how did the system keep letting him go? And what would it take to finally stop him? Stay with us, because the next chapter takes us to a surprising twist. Maurice's threats didn't just stay in Utah. If you're gripped by this case, hit that subscribe button to stay updated on true crime stories like this, and let us know in the comments. What would you do if you lived next to someone like Maurice? By August 2022, Maurice Raffoul's violence in Sugar House, choking his father, threatening neighbors, and sparking a SWAT standoff, had pushed his Utah community to its breaking point. But what neighbors in Salt Lake City didn't know was that Maurice's reign of terror wasn't limited to their streets. Hundreds of miles away in Lafayette, Louisiana, he was targeting a whole new set of victims, all while sitting in his parents' home on Chadwick Street. Now let's uncover a shocking twist: Maurice's connection to Louisiana, where his male Karen behavior, entitled aggressive and menacing, took on an even darker edge. Let's explore how a storage facility, a hospital, and a web of threats tied Maurice to a city 1,500 miles away. Maurice and his mother, Donna Duran Raffoul, co-owned a storage facility in Lafayette, Louisiana, a business that tied them to the area for years. According to 2 News investigations, Maurice frequently traveled between Salt Lake City and Lafayette, helping manage this family business. But in 2018, something went terribly wrong. Maurice was involuntarily committed to a psychiatric hospital in Lafayette. Court records don't specify which one, but it's believed to be Lafayette General Medical Center. The details of his commitment are murky, but what's clear is that Maurice didn't take it lightly. He blamed the doctor who ordered it, a man named Dr. Lance Fogelman, and his anger turned into a chilling campaign of threats. On July 16, 2018, Lafayette police responded to a burglary at Maurice's storage facility. 2 suspects had cut locks with bolt cutters, and police body camera footage captured officers ordering them to come out with their hands up. It's unclear if Maurice was one of the suspects, but this incident marked a turning point. Soon after, Maurice began leaving voicemails for Dr. Fogelman, the doctor who'd had him committed. In one message recorded on August 3, 2021, Maurice unleashed a profanity-laced tirade saying, "Hey, Lance Fogelman, you lying," and explicitly threatening to kill the doctor, his wife, and even their children. He claimed he knew what they looked like and where they lived. These weren't idle threats. Maurice's history of violence in Utah showed he was capable of following through. But Dr. Fogelman wasn't his only target. Maurice also called a nurse named Adele at the hospital, accusing the staff of running an invalid operation. On May 5, 2020, he told her, "You guys aren't running a hospital of any validity, ma'am. My name is Maurice Raffoul." He went further, threatening to blow up Lafayette General Medical Center and kill police officers in the city. These calls, traced back to Salt Lake City, showed Maurice's ability to terrorize from afar, using his phone as a weapon. He even accused the Lafayette Police Department and Lafayette Parish Sheriff's Office of being corrupt, claiming they were part of a conspiracy to rob his storage units and frame him. This paranoia, tied to his schizotype disorder, fueled his rage across state lines. In Lafayette, Maurice's threats didn't stop at the hospital. Two women, Kay Gaspar and Monica Hargett, who own Lux Spa in Lafayette, became his targets after meeting him in 2015. They told 2 News they initially saw Maurice as a client who seemed business-oriented, traveling to help his mother with the storage facility. But over time, his behavior turned menacing. In October 2020, Maurice sent Monica a letter from Salt Lake City with a fake $1 million bill and a taunting note. "Here is a donation for Larry Hargett. Nothing is too good for you ladies. Hope he will use this money wisely. Enjoy this while it lasts." He called them con artists and grifters, even accusing them of being part of an MS-13 gang plot. Kay said he found her kids on social media, sent them threatening messages, and harassed an elderly woman, the mother of another client named Erin Preece, leaving her in tears. Kay and Monica fought back. Kay, a nurse practitioner, faced a 108-page complaint Maurice filed against her license with the Louisiana State Board of Nursing, filled with wild accusations of crimes and gang stalking. The board dismissed it, with an investigator telling Kay, "We don't believe him. It's evident he's crazy." The women got a restraining order, but police couldn't serve it because Maurice was in Utah. They told 2 News, "The Lafayette police know him by name. Every time I called, they'd say, 'Oh, you're talking about Maurice?'" But despite a warrant for his arrest in Lafayette, police decided not to pursue extradition. Why? An investigator explained they feared bringing Maurice back would make him a bigger and real threat to the community. Instead, they sent their reports to an FBI agent, Daniel English, for review, but no federal charges followed. For the victims in Louisiana, this was a bitter outcome. Kay Gaspar told 2 News, "He'll beg and plead in front of a judge, saying he's sorry, then kill somebody tomorrow." Monica and Kay connected with Cheryl Hannon in Utah, sharing their stories of terror. Cheryl said, "I'm grateful for the Louisiana ladies. They didn't want us to feel alone." But in Lafayette, there was no justice. Maurice faced no charges for threatening to bomb a hospital, kill a doctor, or harass women like Kay and Monica. His ability to intimidate from 1,500 miles away showed just how far his male Karen behavior could reach. Back in Utah, Maurice's neighbors had no idea about his Louisiana victims. But his actions in Sugar House were about to take another turn, driven by the same paranoia and rage that fueled his threats in Lafayette. What would he do next? And how much longer could the system let him go? If you're stunned by this cross-country terror, hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments. Should Maurice have been extradited to Louisiana? By 2022, Maurice Raffoul's terror had stretched from the streets of Sugar House, Utah, to the city of Lafayette, Louisiana, leaving a trail of fear and unanswered questions. His assaults, threats, and a SWAT standoff showed he was a danger to everyone around him. But what drove Maurice to this point? Was it just his untreated mental illness? Or was there something, or someone, keeping his chaos alive? Now we're going to look inside Maurice's mind, where paranoia and delusions created a world of enemies, and into his family, where his parents, especially his father, Asad Raffoul, played a complicated role. Was the Raffoul family enabling a male Karen whose behavior tore apart a community, or were they victims of his illness too? Let's find out. Maurice's schizotype disorder wasn't just a diagnosis. It shaped how he saw the world. Court records and 2 News investigations reveal he was consumed by delusions, believing he was the target of a vast conspiracy. To Maurice, his neighbors weren't just people living nearby. They were out to get him. He accused Sean Hannon, a KUTV news employee who lived down the street, of hacking his phones and computers. Sean, a quiet family man, became a central figure in Maurice's warped reality. Maurice claimed Sean was working with what he called the Louisiana mob, a shadowy group he believed was orchestrating his downfall. These weren't just passing thoughts. Maurice's paranoia drove his threats, like telling Cheryl Hannon to dig a hole for her husband. But Maurice's delusions didn't stop with neighbors. He turned his accusations toward the Salt Lake City police, insisting they were corrupt and in league with the FBI to frame him. In one recorded call to police, reported by 2 News, Maurice ranted about surveillance and conspiracies, claiming the FBI was investigating his neighbors for hacking his devices. There's no evidence the FBI was involved, but to Maurice, this was real. His male Karen behavior, demanding control, lashing out at perceived slights, took on a new dimension with these delusions. He wasn't just entitled, he saw himself as a victim fighting a grand plot. And he wasn't alone in this mindset. His father, Maurice Raffoul, shared and even amplified these beliefs. Assad, a man in his 70s by the 2000s and 20s, wasn't just a passive bystander. Court records and 2 News interviews show he actively defended Maurice, even after his son's violent attacks. When Maurice choked him in September 2021, Assad downplayed the assault, telling police his son didn't mean it. When Maurice demanded $50,000 and threatened to kill him in June 2022, Assad again stood by him. Why? Part of it was family loyalty, but 2 News suggests Assad also bought into Maurice's conspiracy theories. He accused neighbors like Sean Hannon of being part of the same Louisiana mob plot, claiming they were hacking the family's electronics and working with police to harass them. In court filings, Assad even suggested the media, including 2 News reporter Wendy Halloran, was involved in a cover-up. Assad's role went beyond words. He repeatedly bailed Maurice out of jail, paying bonds to bring him back to the Sugar House home, despite probation orders banning Maurice from being there. Neighbors like Jeff Dibb told 2 News they were furious, saying, "Every time we thought he was gone, his parents brought him back." Assad's actions kept Maurice on the streets, free to harass and threaten. But one of the most troubling parts of this story is how Assad fought against Maurice getting proper mental health treatment. Court records show Maurice refused medication for his schizotype disorder, and Assad backed him up, arguing traditional drugs would turn his son into a vegetable. Instead, Assad pushed for a device called BiTap, a non-medical tool marketed as a way to reduce anxiety by tapping on the skull. He told courts it was better than medication, claiming it would help Maurice without side effects. There's no scientific evidence BiTap treats schizotype disorders, but Assad's belief in it kept Maurice untreated and unstable. This decision baffled neighbors and authorities. Cheryl Hannon told 2 News, "If he'd gotten help, maybe we wouldn't have lived in fear for so long." For residents, Assad's resistance to medication wasn't just a family choice. It was a choice that endangered their lives. So, were Maurice's parents enablers or victims? On one hand, Assad and Donna faced their son's violence firsthand. Maurice's 2021 and 2022 assaults on his father left Assad bruised and shaken, and Donna lived in the same chaotic home. They were dealing with a son whose mental illness made him unpredictable and dangerous. On the other hand, their actions, bailing him out, dismissing his crimes, and blocking treatment, kept the cycle of terror going. Neighbor Sean Bailey told 2 News they had the power to stop this, but they didn't. The Raffoul family's dynamics raise a tough question. Where do you draw the line between love for a child and responsibility for their actions? As Maurice's delusions grew, so did his defiance. His conspiracy theories didn't just fuel his rage, they set the stage for his final clash with the law. Back in Sugar House, the neighborhood was about to see the consequences of years of unchecked behavior. What would it take to bring Maurice's terror to an end? Stay with us, because the next chapter shows how justice finally caught up with him. If you're wrestling with whether Maurice's parents were enablers or victims, let us know in the comments below, and hit that like button to support more true crime stories like this. For years, Maurice Raffoul terrorized Sugar House, Utah, and even reached across state lines to threaten victims in Louisiana. His male Karen behavior, entitled, aggressive, and relentless, left neighbors like Cheryl and Sean Hannon living in fear, while his family's enabling kept him on the streets. By late 2023, though, the tide was turning. A series of arrests, charges, and a determined prosecutor would finally bring Maurice face to face with the consequences of his actions. This chapter is the climax of our story: how the law caught up with Maurice, how his victims fought for justice, and how a neighborhood reclaimed its peace. Let's start with November 2023, when a single video changed everything. On November 3rd, 2023, Maurice was caught on the Hannons' home surveillance camera violating their civil stalking injunctions. Screaming profanities and taunting Cheryl and Sean, he yelled, "Nobody messes with me," and told them to get on their knees at the district attorney's office. This outburst, reported by 2 News, was the last straw. On November 15, just hours before 2 News aired its first investigation into Maurice's terror, adult probation and parole agents arrested him for violating the injunctions. He was taken to Salt Lake County Metro Jail with no bail, and a no overcrowding release order ensured he stayed put. For the first time in years, Chadwick Street felt a moment of calm. But Maurice wasn't done causing trouble. Even from jail, Maurice's defiance continued. On March 18, 2024, he sent a letter to his neighbor Sean Bailey, mistakenly addressed to Sean Brooke. Sean, who'd called 911 in 2023, fearing Maurice would kill someone, was a witness in the stalking cases. The letter begged Sean to help drop the charges, saying, "My parents are really hurting. I just wanted them to move out of Utah." The Hannons believed Maurice sent it to Sean knowing he'd show it to them, skirting the injunctions indirectly. Salt Lake County Deputy District Attorney Melanie Serasio charged Maurice with witness tampering, a third-degree felony, adding to his growing list of offenses. Neighbors were stunned. How could he keep harassing them from behind bars? By July 2024, Maurice's legal battles reached a turning point. Facing 6 counts of violating civil stalking injunctions, plus the witness tampering charge, he pleaded guilty in 5 separate cases. The tampering charge was reduced to attempted witness tampering, a Class A misdemeanor, as part of a plea deal. His public defender, Brock Von de Kamp, told Judge William Kendall that Maurice's schizotype disorder, marked by delusions, was at the heart of his crimes. Doctors at the jail had forcibly medicated him after a court order, a step his father, Assad, had long resisted. Van de Kamp said, "These cases are how his serious mental illness came to a head." But prosecutor Melanie Serasio saw it differently. She called Maurice's actions a reign of terror on his neighborhood and his own parents. On August 22, 2024, Judge William Kendall delivered a sentence that echoed through Sugar House, revoking Maurice's probation for 3 prior cases and sentencing him for the new charges. Kendall called him essentially a one-person crime spree and disruptor of neighborhood harmony for a very long time. He ordered Maurice to the Utah State Prison, leaving the Board of Pardons and Parole to decide his release date. Cheryl Hannon, sobbing in court, described the emotionally exhausting experience of living in fear. She and Sean both begged for the maximum penalty, with Sean saying, "Even with injunctions, he kept threatening our lives." Other neighbors, like Jeff Dibb and Sean Bailey, echoed their relief. For them, prison meant safety at last. But Maurice's story didn't end with sentencing. In May 2025, he faced a parole hearing, hoping for early release. Cheryl Hannon spoke at the hearing, her voice trembling as she recalled Maurice's threat to dig a hole for her husband, Sean. She told Parole Board Chair Scott Stevenson, "I'm deathly afraid of him. I don't want to become a statistic." The board denied parole, citing 2 key factors. Maurice's crimes spanned years, and they harmed multiple victims. They ordered a mental health evaluation by August 2027, along with anger management classes and compliance with a case action plan. Maurice would stay in prison until at least his next hearing in August 2027, a decision that brought tears of relief to Cheryl and her neighbors. For Sugar House, Maurice's incarceration was a hard-won victory. Cheryl Hannon told 2 News, "It means everything because this has been a really hard road." Sean Bailey, who'd lived in fear for decades, said the quiet on Chadwick Street was like a weight lifted. But the story leaves lingering questions. What about the Louisiana victims, like Kay Gaspar and Monica Hargett, who never saw justice? And what does Maurice's case say about mental illness and the law? His delusions drove his crimes, but his refusal and his family's resistance to treatment kept the cycle going. The male Karen who demanded control and terrorized his community was finally stopped, but at what cost? As we close this story, Sugar House is healing, but the scars remain. Maurice Raffoul's reign of terror is over, thanks to neighbors who refuse to back down, and a system that, after years of missteps, finally held him accountable. What do you think? Did Maurice get the justice he deserved, or is prison the right place for someone with his mental illness? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if this story gripped you, hit that subscribe button for more true crime stories like this. Stay with us for a final reflection on what Maurice's case means for communities everywhere. Maurice Raffoul's story has taken us through decades of terror in Sugar House, Utah, and across state lines to Lafayette, Louisiana. From over 200 police calls to violent assaults, a SWAT standoff, and threats to bomb a hospital, his actions as a male Karen, entitled confrontational and dangerous, left a community scarred. In August 2024, a judge called him a one-person crime spree and sent him to prison. In May 2025, his parole was denied, keeping him behind bars until at least August 2027. But as we close this story, the question remains: what does Maurice's case mean for the people he hurt, for the systems that failed them, and for all of us watching? Let's reflect on the impact of his actions and the bigger issues his story raises. For the residents of Sugar House, Maurice's imprisonment brought relief, but the fear he instilled lingers. Cheryl Hannon, who lived with PTSD from his threats, told 2 News after the parole hearing, "It means everything because this has been a really hard road." She and her husband, Sean, still check their surveillance cameras, haunted by years of Maurice's taunts and threats to dig a hole for Sean. Other neighbors, like Jeff Dibb and Sean Bailey, described a quiet that felt almost surreal after decades of chaos. But that peace came at a cost. The strain on police resources was immense. Over 200 calls to one address stretched Salt Lake City's ability to respond to other emergencies. Neighbors felt abandoned, forced to document Maurice's behavior themselves to push for action. The Raffoul case also exposed cracks in the mental health system. Maurice's schizotype disorder drove his delusions, from accusing neighbors of hacking to believing in a Louisiana mob. Yet for years he refused medication, and his father, Assad, fought against forced treatment, advocating for a BiTAP device instead. Court records show it wasn't until 2024, after a court-ordered forced medication in jail, that Maurice began treatment. Cheryl Hannon told 2 News, "If he'd gotten help, maybe we wouldn't have lived in fear for so long." The failure to intervene early left neighbors vulnerable and Maurice's condition unchecked, raising a tough question. What happens when mental illness and crime collide? Maurice's story forces us to grapple with how communities protect themselves from someone like him. His male Karen behavior, demanding control, lashing out at anyone who challenged him, fits the stereotype of entitlement we see in viral videos. But Maurice wasn't just yelling about a parking spot or a store policy. His violence, from choking his father to threatening to kill neighbors, set him apart. The label captures his need to dominate, but it also risks oversimplifying a case tied to untreated mental illness and a broken system. Sugar House residents fought back with restraining orders, surveillance cameras, and relentless calls to police, but it took years for justice to catch up. How can communities act faster when one person holds them hostage? Then there's the question of justice itself. Today, 2025, Maurice Raffoul remains in the Utah State Prison, serving his sentence with a parole hearing scheduled for August 2027. The parole board's May 2025 decision to deny his release came with conditions: a mental health evaluation, anger management classes, and compliance with a case action plan. For victims like Cheryl Hannon, this was a victory, but for others like Kay Gaspar and Monica Hargett in Louisiana, justice never came. Their stories, threatened by Maurice's calls and letters, were left unresolved, with no charges filed despite a Lafayette warrant. This gap leaves us wondering, is prison the answer for someone like Maurice? Or should forced mental health treatment have come sooner? Maurice Raffoul's case is a mirror for bigger issues: how we handle mental illness, how we balance family loyalty with public safety, and how we ensure justice for all victims. His neighbors in Sugar House are healing, their streets quiet again, but the lessons of this story linger. Should people like Maurice be forced into treatment before their actions destroy lives? Or is prison the only way to protect communities when the system fails? These questions don't have easy answers, but they're worth asking. As we leave this story, I want to hear from you. What do you think the system should do with someone like Maurice? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if this case moved you, hit that like button to support more true crime stories like this. As we close this story, we're left to wonder what could have been different. Could earlier treatment have stopped Maurice's terror? Should his parents have done more to protect their neighbors? And what would you do if someone like Maurice lived next door? These are the questions that make true crime stories like this so gripping, and we want to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. What would you do if Maurice Raffoul was your neighbor? Should mental health treatment be mandatory for people like him? Like this video if this story kept you hooked, and subscribe to Crime Scene for more true crime documentaries that uncover the cases you've never heard before. Next time on Crime Scene, we're tackling another shocking case that will leave you questioning everything. Share this video with your friends who love true crime, and let's keep the conversation going.